Hello and welcome to a special edition of the In the Money Players podcast. Where they said it would never happen. We're doing something that we said in the past wasn't of interest to us. We've changed our mind. We have that prerogative. We are doing a Derby top 10 list, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Peter Thomas Fornatale here with you in the Brooklyn Bunker, being joined by a man coming to us from colder climes in upstate New York. He's Jonathon Kinchen. JK, you pumped for this top 10?
Yeah, look, I'm not over the top about these top 10 lists and what they really mean, but I will say this. There's 10 horses that I think are very interesting to talk about leading into the Kentucky Derby. And if we got to call it a top 10 list, what the heck? We'll call it a top 10 list.
Well, part of why we're doing this also is we have a fantastic member of the team, Eric DeCoster, who helps out all the time with our In the Money Plus service, our free newsletter, inthemoneypodcast.com/email. And he has put together an excellent top 10 list that we're really going to riff on and talk about. And that's where we're going to begin. Without further ado, JK, let's start at number 10 as we do this countdown. And the first horse on Eric's list, which folks can find over at inthemoneypodcast.com, is Honor Marie. This is a horse that was a nice long shot winner. I was pleased to give out on TV for the last race. But is Honor Marie a serious contender for a race like the Kentucky Derby from this far out? What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think they're all contenders at this point, right? As we go through this list, we'll find out. Honor Marie specifically, trained by connections that used to work for Chad Brown and Todd Pletcher. So you know that there's going to be that experience on what to do with a good horse, getting a good horse to progress in the right direction. We'll touch on Todd Pletcher and Chad Brown a little bit later in this top 10. But this is one thing with Honor Marie that's a little bit of a concern to me. I typically don't like deep closers in the Kentucky Derby. I know that most people think mile and a quarter, longest race of their career, the longer, the better. I don't think that's actually the case. I actually think that sometimes being forward is better, and we'll talk about that as well throughout this top 10. Honor Marie right there in the mix, but it's going to have to prove it to me. Maybe a little bit of an evolution to the style can warm me up a little bit more.
Interesting, and obviously it's early in the season and these things can change. Not exactly sure where Honor Marie is going to be making the next start. Definitely more questions than answers at this point, but certainly a resume that warrants talking about on a show like our Derby Top 10 with this Honor Marie. We'll move on to a very exciting prospect who clocks in at number 9 on our top 10 hit list. This is a horse who's made just one start, but what an impressive start it was. What do you make of Knightsbridge, JK?
Well, one of the things we'll talk about when we're looking at the Kentucky Derby throughout this Triple Crown lead-up season is pedigree. Do these horses want to go this far, right? They're going to be going a mile and a quarter in the Kentucky Derby for the first time. Knightsbridge is a half to Speaker's Corner, a very talented horse that Godolphin ran, but more of a one-turn type of horse. So does that give us a clue that maybe Knightsbridge is going to have some distance limitations? But like you said, this horse was impressive last time, won on Breeders' Cup Day. I'm sure the boys in blue might have even forgot about this horse. They were too busy winning big Breeders' Cup races with Cody's Wish and Master of the Seas, but I'm sure they still were pretty excited about Knightsbridge. Sheikh Muhammad obviously has been wanting to win a Kentucky Derby, and maybe Knightsbridge is one of those horses that can get that done. He ran fast enough and overcame some adversity. But how good was that race really? I think we'll find out here in the next couple of weeks.
Horse won by 10, but the form of the race has not worked out very well. I think 6 have come back, none have won, but almost more importantly than that, a lot of the figures have dropped. So was it beating trees by 10? We'll see. It was impressive enough. Knightsbridge definitely belongs on this Derby top 10 list. Let's move on to a horse that's was under my radar before the last run anyway in the Gunrunner Stakes. Track Phantom got the job done there, and now looks like one who may have a run for the roses in the future. I assume will be on the trail down in New Orleans based on starting the year in the Gunrunner. What did you make of that Gunrunner Stakes?
Yeah, look, it's a two-turn stake. Leading up to the Kentucky Derby, we know that it's always important to pass that test. Track Phantom has a couple of good things and a couple of bad things going for him. The first one, he's trained by a Hall of Famer and Steve Asmussen, which is always something that is nice to have in your corner. Unfortunately, It's the Kentucky Derby-less Steve Asmussen. As many races as he's won in this country, the Kentucky Derby has eluded him. So that's, I would say, probably still a negative for this horse. But I will say this horse is very forward, and I like horses that can be forward. I like horses that can handle two turns. The one thing is that the pedigree suggests that maybe this horse might have some distance limitations, but what they've done on the racetrack suggests something different. I would think Track Phantom is the type of horse that could continue to improve and climb his way up the ladder of this top 10 Derby list.
Yes, certainly a sexy pedigree, by quality road out of an Into Mischief dam. And we've seen this time and again in recent years where if the blood doesn't scream a mile and a quarter, as long as they can get mile and a 16th on blood, the best trainers seem to be able to train them to get the rest of the way home. Let's see what happens with Track Phantom along the road to the Roses. Next up, a horse, JK, that I know you have a deep and abiding love for, and it's not just because of the musical hunch play. Tell us your history with Timberlake.
Yeah, I mean, I made a huge wager, I think maybe a $15,000 wager on the Breeders' Cup betting challenge on Timberlake to win that juvenile. He wasn't able to do so that day. Was training lights out up to that. He'd had some really big performances in races like the Grade 1 Champagne. And then he just had some time off. And in fact, when we were making this list, I had to reach out to the jockey Florent Giroux to ask, hey, is Timberlake hurt? And he said he's training at Fairgrounds and he will be breathing soon. So if everything kind of falls into place, Timberlake could get right back in the mix of this conversation. And I think he's got a ton of talent. And with a trainer like Brad Cox, there's certain trainers that give you a little bit of comfort in the fact that they're going to get these horses progressing in the right direction. Timberlake is number 7 now, but in 3-4 weeks, he could jump right up to number 2.
You could definitely see that happening. Brad Cox has won a Kentucky Derby, but only learned of the victory months later after a DQ. I know he's eager to win one on the track, this native Louisvillian, and Timberlake certainly gives him a chance if he progresses from some of those excellent races we saw as a 2-year-old. Next up on the hit list is a horse who was very impressive visually, I thought, last out in the San Vicente, comes out of that Breeders' Cup Juvenile as well, and he's already been back, not just on the racetrack, but even winning races. Where are you with a runner like Moth?
Well, I mean, if you look at him as an individual, he looks like the type of horse that can go on to win a Kentucky Derby, right? Brilliance as a 2-year-old, Grade 1 winner, trained by a Hall of Famer who knows how to win the Kentucky Derby, pedigree, class, speed, jockey. Oh, but one of those things might actually be a problem for him, which is his trainer, Bob Baffert, who it's been well publicized as of right now will not be able to run horses in the Kentucky Derby. And I'm not sure about the connections of Moth. Are they going to stick by their guy in Baffert? Will they do that thing we've seen in the years past, switching trainers? Moth feels like one that they'll keep with Bob Baffert. So it's really going to be an issue of whether or not he can run, whether he deserves to be on this list. The horse as an individual definitely does. He's got a lot of talent. He's progressing in the right direction. It was a nice comeback race last time. First start as a 3-year-old, and I think he'll continue to progress. It's just a matter of whether or not he'll be in that 20-horse starting gate come the first Saturday in May.
I would assume that with Bob Baffert's blessing, owner Amir Zidane would switch this one for the requisite races to get that place in the starting gate. It's just worth too much to the horse. Not only are we talking about this now $5 million purse of the Kentucky Derby, but obviously that purse is insignificant compared to what it could mean for a horse in terms of their future value, especially a $2 million baby like Moth, should they be able to win a race like the Derby. But I agree, it's a concern because we've seen these horses go from Baffert to other trainers and they haven't had that same form. It remains a question mark, but certainly on the body of work, Moth, a horse that deserves consideration for the Kentucky Derby from this far out. Let's actually pause for a second, JK, and let me ask you a general Derby question about this $5 million purse. Very, very exciting news to see, and I know there's been a lot on social media about this increase in the purse. What does it mean to you as a fan of the game to see the big purse boost to the $5 million for the Run for the Roses?
Well, I mean, I think it's great, right? I mean, look, we have races in Saudi that are 20 million. We've got races in Dubai that are worth tons of million. The Breeders' Cup Classic, $5 million. But if you think about it, racing in general in this world, especially this country, everyone thinks about the Kentucky Derby being the biggest race on the biggest day. And to me, that deserves a big purse. And I think that having a $5 million Kentucky Derby is definitely the direction we need to be moving in. That race could be, I wouldn't have a problem if it was a $10 million purse, especially the amount that's handled that day. So I'm happy that it's going in that direction, and hopefully it'll continue to grow.
Feels like a good use of some of those KTDF funds that help in Kentucky racing in general. And yeah, it's not going to get a bigger field than we already get, because you can't get a bigger field than we already get. But there is something that just feels sort of cosmically right about this. And maybe it leads to a purse increase in some other races in the Triple Crown Trail that might have a significant effect on field size moving forward. We'll have to see about that. Do want to let you know that today's video is brought to you by our friends at the Pegasus World Cup Betting Challenge. This is horse racing's most player-friendly handicapping tournament, and it's back Saturday, January 27th. I'll be there. JK will be there. So what makes this contest so great? Well, for one thing, First Racing, who own Gulfstream and Santa Anita, they're going to be seeding the Pegasus purse with $50,000 of their own cash. You put up $6,000 per entry. Of that, $5,000 is your tournament bankroll, with $1,000 fueling the prize pool. That gives you an excellent chance to walk away with money, and much more money for you to rocket up to the top of the leaderboard. At an estimated 200 players, going to be talking about $250,000 in the prize pool. And then there's some terrific prizes. We got heaps of cash. We've got BCBC seats, NHC seats, and seats to the new and improved Ultimate Betting Challenge you're going to be hearing a lot more about. And you can play in the Pegasus contest online at ExpressBet, or on track at Gulfstream or Santa Anita. Think you have what it takes? Head over to pwcbc.com for registration and more information. And so we continue with our top 10 list as we get to the top 5, and a horse who I think has a very interesting profile and has shown some real class on the racetrack in his 2 starts to date. Sierra Leone, another gun runner baby. This one out of a Malibu Moon dam, successful in, well, not successful actually, ran a huge race in the Remsen, only to get run down late by Dornick. Successful on debut with an open length win in a race that's produced good form. JK, how keen are you on Sierra Leone?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this horse deserves to be in the top 5. I think anytime you have a horse who can do what he did, he made a huge run in that Remsen and did it impressively, and did it against a horse in Dornoch, who I think, is also in this top 5. So I have no problem with the excitement of Sierra Leone. Like I said earlier in the show, I do have a problem with horses that come from way out of it. But maybe Sierra Leone can kind of progress in that arena of being a little bit more forward with a future Hall of Famer and Chad Brown. You'd like to think that some adjustments can be made through Sierra Leone's career to kind of get him a little bit closer. The one negative I will say, I guess, about Sierra Leone, and I'll say the same thing about Dornoch, is that since 1999, only 4 horses that have run in the Rebsen have even made the Derby. And there's not been much success there. Zandon was 3rd, Mucho Macho Man was 3rd, Bluegrass Cat 2nd, Empire Maker 2nd. But there hasn't been any wins of horses that have won in the Remsen. And I think that's a situation of like a horse who's ready to run in November going 9 furlongs might not be the same type of horse who's ready to win at 1.25 miles when everyone's caught up in the first Saturday in May.
I think that's a fluke, honestly. I mean, we saw with Mo Donegal and Zandon horses that went on to have big grade 1 futures as 3-year-olds. And I think it just depends on the group of horses. And we'll see. So far, the one form cue we have from the Remsen is a positive one. But we'll see what happens with Sierra Leone going forward. Hopefully can bolster some of that New York form.
I will say this, Pete. This is the Derby top 10, not the who's going to be good later in their life top 10. So the Remsen to me has just not been a productive race.
Well, we'll agree to disagree on that one. Let's move on, though, to the horse that actually won the race, and that's Dornoch. And this was an extremely impressive and game victory. A horse that led early, looked to be in trouble, and then would not be denied. And a horse that's had hype on him in large part because of his bloodlines ever since Saratoga. Tell us what you think about Dornoch.
Well, I think you know how I feel about the Remsen based on how I talked about Sierra Leone. With that said, none of those horses that have run in the Remsen since 1999 and come back to run in the Kentucky Derby were full brothers to the horse that won it the year before. I think Dornoch has a little bit more in his corner in terms of the ability to continue to kind of progress. Danny Gargan, although he's a good trainer who wins lots of races, He's had a couple of horses that have won the Remsen or run well in the Remsen and have not done much moving forward in terms of the Triple Crown, right? Dubunel, who didn't really do much, didn't make it into the gate. And then Tax, another one who ran well in the Remsen and didn't go on. So Dornock's got a lot in his corner. But the problem with Dornock is this is a betting sport. And we're talking about this mostly for betting reasons. This horse's pedigree and the fact that he's a foal to Mage, who won the Kentucky Derby last year, that's going to haunt his price for the rest of his Triple Crown season. He's always going to be a little bit overbet, in my opinion, and that's a little bit of a problem. He deserves to be here on the top 5 list, but I don't necessarily have much interest in betting him moving forward.
Dornock apparently will appear next in the Fountain of Youth. Those are the plans. If I made you pick head-to-head between Sierra Leone and Dornock, I think you've tipped your hand which way you'd go.
Yeah, I think Sierra Leone is going to just have a better price in most stops along the way. Unless, of course, Sierra Leone, pops a couple of Grade 1 wins, then that can obviously change. But as of right now, Sierra Leone.
We're up to the top 3, and this horse trained by a man we've talked about a couple of times already on this show, and his name becoming synonymous with having Kentucky Derby starters year in, year out. I'm talking about the Todd Pletcher trainee, Locked, last seen also in that very fast Breeders' Cup Juvenile.
Yeah, look, this is kind of an interesting one for me from a betting standpoint and also just a progression standpoint. People are going to talk about the number 1 horse that we're going to discuss here pretty soon as a pretty big superstar for Todd Pletcher. Now, I think that Locked is going to kind of get ignored because he's kind of the other Todd Pletcher in the barn. But he's got a Grade 1 win. He ran well in that very, very fast Breeders' Cup Juvenile that we'll touch on a little bit later. He's trained by a guy in Todd Pletcher who knows how to get horses to win 2-turn dirt races. I understand that he had a little bit of a daunting record in the Kentucky Derby, but Steve Asmussen, the winningest trainer in thoroughbred history in the United States, hasn't won one either. It's not easy to win a Kentucky Derby, and Todd gets his horses there around 2 turns on the dirt. He did finally pop with a few with Always Dreaming and Super Saver. I think Locked will continue to progress, continue to improve, and continue to kind of be ignored a little bit because the guy in the stall next to him is pretty darn good.
Yeah, we'll get to him in a minute. Locked, another with that Gunrunner Malibu Moon cross. Very, very interesting runner. Do you mind about, at the end of the day, about that stat for Asmussen? People talk for years about Pletcher and supposedly some hoodoo around him. He's shown that to be nonsense, basically, I would say, based on how well his horses have run since. Does it bother you at all?
No, not at all. I mean, it's one of the best dirt horses I've ever seen in my life. Is Curlin that Steve Asmussen trained. He trained him extremely well. Gunrunner, one of the best horses in the last 15 to 20 years. Steve Asmussen trained really well, who ran well in the Derby. It's just there's 20 horses in a field. There's a lot going on. And Gunrunner got beat in the Derby. Curlin got beat in the Derby. Curlin was probably best in the Derby. I think if you get caught up in those situations, it could be a mistake. Now, I think maybe someone, a lower level trainer without much of a record or experience, you could probably throw some stones their direction, but I wouldn't be tossing too many stones in the direction of people like Chad Brown or Steve Asmussen, who have not won their first Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, it's so easy to get fooled by randomness when you're dealing with a small sample. I agree with you completely. Let people bet against Asmussen and Chad Brown, and when the right horse comes along, they'll get it done. It might even be this year. Let's get to number 2 on the list, Jonathan. Getting back to another trainer with lots of Derby history, and once again, questions about this one in terms of participation because of that trainer. I'm speaking, of course, about Nysos, son of Nyquist, out of a Bernardini Dam, last seen at Del Mar, winning impressively with a rock-solid speed figure. Is Nysos a serious contender for the Derby, and what do you think is going to happen with him?
Well, the good news about us doing this top 10 list is that you and I don't have to make the top 10 list. So our friend Eric DeCoster does, so we're allowed to just make fun of some of the ones that he puts in here. This one, for me, I wouldn't have this horse as high, right? He's very talented and seems to have a lot of things going in his direction. He has not proven the 2-turn test yet, although brilliant around 1 turn. And he is in the stable of Bob Baffert, who knows how to win a Kentucky Derby. I know we talked a little bit about Moth and what's going to happen with Moth. You spend $2 million on a horse like Moth, maybe you got to try to get them into the gate of the Kentucky Derby to try to get some of that $2 million back. I will say this about Nysos. This horse was bought by Donato Lani with Bayoma Corporation, who's had basically all of their horses with Bob Baffert. I would be shocked if they move this horse. So it might just be a moot point that he's going to even run the Kentucky Derby, because I don't see them making that change. I see them staying loyal to Bob in that situation. With all that said, talented horse in his own right, he still has a lot to prove in terms of 2 terms, and most importantly, whether or not he'll be in the gate or not.
There has been some buzz about them not moving this horse from Baffert, but I think when push comes to shove, I mean, how do you not blink? It's worth so much that it would seem very strange to me to pass up on the literal time opportunity.
I think the answer of why you don't blink is 2 things. One is loyalty, and the second one is the money doesn't matter to you as much. If you were put into a position, Pete, where you had to turn your back on me, if it was for $50, I don't think you would do it. If it was for 50,000, I think you would turn your back very quickly on me, because 50,000 would matter. I don't think the money matters to the people that we're talking about here, and I don't think they'll make the switch.
It's so much more than money, though. It is a sense of history. I mean, I would just think Baffert himself would want to, be associated with it, but we'll see how it plays out. Moth to me would be very strange if he didn't run. I think you have a better case with Nysos, just based on what sounds like the word on the street. An interesting question in any case. We've got one more horse to talk about, JK, and it will certainly be no surprise. We've seen this video a couple of times. Now we get to see the horse who was so impressive in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and so impressive on debut at Saratoga. Fierceness, son of City of Light out of a Stay Thirsty dam. This one just was jaw-dropping when it came to that Breeders' Cup Juvenile. How enthusiastic are you?
I'm pretty enthusiastic. One of my biggest tests when looking at the Kentucky Derby, right? So we're talking about April, late April. I'm on an airplane. I'm flying to Louisville, trying to decide who's my final choice for the Kentucky Derby. One of the things that has to happen is these horses have to have triple-digit Beyer speed figures, right? A Beyer speed figure, just like quarterback rating in football, the higher the better. I'm looking for those triple digits, those 102s, those 103s, and that can give me the hope that these horses can win the Kentucky Derby on the first Saturday in May. Fierceness ran a triple-digit Beyer in November of his 2-year-old year. He also ran a triple-digit Beyer in his first start as a 2-year-old at Saratoga. And not only is he running triple-digit Beyers, he's running like high triple-digit Beyers, like 108, 109, 110 looking figures. And if he can do that and progress just a little bit as a 2-year-old to a 3-year-old, I think we're talking possible Triple Crown possibility with a horse like Fierceness. And wouldn't that be fun, Pete, up there on Lake Avenue, having a Triple Crown here in Saratoga with the Belmont being here for the first time.
Now, you live in Saratoga, and you're telling me you think the racetrack is on Lake Avenue, Union Avenue. Get your geography right.
Union. Well, I turn off a lake. You know what I meant.
Fierceness was awesome, and the form of this race, this is one, the figure came back strong, and the form is very strong. We've had a couple of winners come out of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but almost more importantly, we've seen a lot of figure improvement. Not necessarily from Moth, but again, that was, going back shorter. I'm not too worried about that, but some of the horses from down in the field that have come back, they've run faster. This is a legit race. This is a legit horse, and I absolutely understand your Triple Crown prediction when it comes to Fierceness, a horse I can't wait to get back to the race.
Just to be clear, Pete, I was saying that the after party will be at your house right off of Lake Avenue if there's a Triple Crown, on the line.
Sounds like the Holy Bull will be next for Fierceness, and it's going to be a fun story to follow. And we'll be doing these videos throughout the year. If you're interested in more of our act, subscribe to the YouTube channel, please. Drop us a comment. Let us know who you think the top contenders are for this year's Kentucky Derby. We'd love to get that buy-in from you. InTheMoneyPodcast.com. That's the website. Lots of free information there on the Derby, on daily racing. Check it out. It's the traffic's been exploding lately, and we'd love to have you be part of the show and subscribe to our podcast feed also in the Money Media, wherever you get your podcasts. And this guy here has a pretty cool interview show too. You might want to check out JK+1, one of the many things we do here at In the Money Media. Gotta thank you, JK, for your time today, and really want to thank everybody for tuning in and checking this out. If you're listening to the audio version, hop over to YouTube and leave your comment there. We appreciate you very much, and we will be back the next time.